Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I hope and trust that you are all well. Before I get started, I would like to give a very special shout out to the reform members of Back to Ashes. Tavia S., Manna Ash, Normie DW, Chrissy Elias, Tina Mead, Cindy Cleveland, Patty's niece, Samantha Place, and Interscure Wifey. The rest of the Back to Ashes membership family can be seen right here on your screen. If you like what you are hearing, please hit that like and subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. And if you do so, please hit that notification bell and set it to all. That way you know every time I upload. Also, if you would like to support a content creator such as myself, you can buy me a coffee. Also, if you'd like to become a member of the Back to Ashes membership family, all that information can be found in the description below. Membership perks include hearing the stories in their uncensored version, access to videos the day before they are published, and much, much more. With all of that being said, it is time to go back to ashes, for when we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and happier person in the morning. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and enjoy this dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Scary Ghost Stories. Right after this intro, an ad will play. I'll read the first story an ad will play. After that, there will be no more ads within this video. I woke up one night being pulled out of my bed. My lower body was off the bed, my top half still on. I jumped up and turned the lights on and was thinking my nephew was just trying to scare me. No one was there. My bedroom door was closed. No one under the bed, no one in the closet, no one in the bathroom. I thought maybe it was a nightmare and I had somehow moved myself halfway off the bed. Well, for 2 weeks after that, something would start tugging my covers at the foot of my bed, slowly pulling them off of me. I would jerk them back up onto the bed and tuck them under my feet. I slept with the lights on for a very long time after that, hardly slept at night, but would fall asleep from exhaustion, only to have my blankets pulled slowly down again. One night, while staying at my sister's house, I was sleeping in a bed that had a metal headboard and footboard. I was awakened to what sounded like a metal pipe being slammed against the footboard. Same as the other story. I jumped up, turned on the light. No one was there. I could feel the vibrations as the bed was hit, and it hit it about 10 times in a row. One house I lived in had a shadow person. It would go down the hallway towards the bedrooms. I saw it. All 3 of my kids saw it. My, now ex-husband did not believe us. One day, the kids and I went shopping. Husband stayed home. When we got back, he looked at me very seriously and said, "I saw your shadow man." I never felt so vindicated in all my life. Alright, I'm going to explain why I believe there is a presence in my family's house. But first, some context. There are 2 houses on our property, a large one that we rent, and a small one we stay in. When we weren't renting it, we enjoy living in the big house and stay in the guest bedrooms. I am currently staying in a room on the first floor. There are 2 floors, by the way. And my parents usually stay in the master bedroom upstairs. Occasionally, they will go back to the small house to stay in their designated room out there. But since I like the large house so much, I usually stay in it anyways, alone. I'm not incredibly terrified of anything happening when I'm alone on the first floor or in the house, as we are in a pretty good town. I do, however, spend my leisurely time enjoying Reddit stories about the paranormal and let's not meet. That being said, I always have scenarios and a plan in my head. I am very much a night person. And before I got a puppy a few weeks ago, my sleep schedule was even worse than it is now. Now, on to the story. Over the last few months, I have been noticing very small things around the house at very late hours. The most common is a door opening or closing slightly and causing the hinges to make a deep groaning sound. I usually don't see the doors move, but I always hear the familiar noise it would make if I were to move it. Each time I feel the air for wind and airflow, and each time there is no one there. Keep in mind, these are super heavy solid wooden doors that have no reason to be swinging around at night. I have only noticed this occurring with a closet door in our hallway, which is built in under the stairs, and the guest bedroom door to the one I'm staying in. Usually my response to the closet door opening or closing is to look behind my shoulder when I hear the hinges groan, say loudly, "Do you mind?" and then return to what I'm doing. There are 5 more obvious experiences, however, that have really gotten me thinking. This Halloween, I had a friend over so we could do festive things and watch some old classic Tim Burton movies. As we sat there after dark in the dining room enjoying some fall-themed cookies, she suddenly stared me dead in the eyes and told me she had felt something by her legs. When prompted further, she explained that she had put her hand on her lap with her cookie in it, and felt what seemed like a dog brush by to reach up for her cookie. We have a large dog in addition to a puppy, so she looked down expecting to see him under the table. There was nothing there, but she swore there was the presence of a black dog under there. None of our dogs are black, and none of them were under the table. We did, however, have a black lab that died about 7 years ago. She didn't know this, and I saw how freaked out she was. After that, I felt my baggy sweatpants bend inwards, as though I was bending my leg. I was not, and the way I felt them move could only have been from something brushing by. Again, nothing was under the table. Sometimes I use the upstairs master bedroom as a study place, as there are some desks against the far wall. If it gets too late and my parents aren't staying up there, I will claim the room for the night. Every time I've stayed up there, I've heard noises coming from the bathroom. On this particular night, it happened to be Hallows' Eve, and at the time, 3:13 a.m. on Halloween Day. You might have seen the reality ripple filter on TikTok that people use to allegedly see ghosts. I decided that I was going to try it when I walked into the bathroom to check out the noises. And I didn't expect to see anything. I got something very strange on my camera. During the summer, before I got my puppy, I would stay up until about 4 or 5 a.m., finishing schoolwork for a math program I had signed up for. I was staying in a back bedroom on the first floor and decided I wanted a 3 a.m. snack. I walked down the hallway and stopped when I heard the oven beeping. The time read exactly 3:01 a.m. The oven makes a beeping noise when you push the buttons, so I was confused and then gradually more terrified as I heard the beeping continue. I watched as the oven screen was filled with flashing orange placeholders, which I had never seen before, each one beeping as it was entered, and then a bunch of ones and zeros, which were entered much quicker. There was no one there, and I had never seen the oven do this before. It was as if someone was typing in the numbers. I was freaking out by now, but as I moved into full view of the kitchen towards the stairs to go wake up my parents, it stopped. I froze on the stairs and waited. The oven screen made 1 or 2 more beeping sounds and then returned to its usual green digital clock. I was horrified. By this time, I realized that it would be useless to wake them up, as there was no evidence of this happening. There was no immediate danger, and they probably wouldn't believe me anyways. I went straight to bed after that, believing I had just seen something I was not supposed to. One of the most recent and scariest encounters I've experienced involved my new dog. I keep her with me at night, and she always chills on the bed with me. She's a mini schnauzer, so she's always incredibly alert. She's pretty bonded to me, so she will still occasionally bark at my parents if they sneak up on her. I was on the computer doing schoolwork, and my parents had gone to bed hours ago. All of a sudden, she started to bark exactly as she would at a person perched at the end of the bed facing the closet and the bedroom door. I was immediately freaked out, but assumed it was my mother, who was a light sleeper, coming to check on me. That was until I noticed the door, which was open about 7 inches, gracefully closed by itself. I thought that I must have missed her hand on the door or something, but the hallway was lit very well at the time, and before it had closed, I had looked through it and clearly seen absolutely nothing and no one. I'm paranoid now. I yelled, "Mom?" a few times, but to no avail. I then, very cautiously, grabbed the nearest sharpened pencil for my homework setup and slowly opened the door. The hallway was empty. No one was awake. I'm convinced that my dog either saw something or sensed something that night, and for whatever reason, felt the need to alarm me. Now the bedroom door has moved before, but never that far. Usually I hear the latch squeak when it moves, which has grown completely normal to me, but not like this. This was too freaky. I used to have horrible nightmares. This ties in with my theory that this presence can only tread in a certain path, as some of these events have occurred in a clear line across the property. I had a dream, or maybe a night terror that I was laying in my bed waiting to fall asleep, and all of a sudden, a voice passed through my head whispering. I can only explain this as how you hear a ghost. I felt this sudden sense of foggy blackness in my head, and it felt like someone was choking me. I woke up gasping for air. It seemed too real. I had another dream where I was in my bedroom in the small house while we had renters, I assumed. This bedroom is also within the line of paranormal theory. I was in my bed, but I couldn't move. My room seemed to loom over me, and there was some dim lighting. All of a sudden, it gets fuzzy. Glowing figures started to emerge from beneath my bed. He was very tall, but he had no defined edges of his figure because they were constantly moving. The best way I can describe it is that he was made of electricity, because he made very electric noises. He crackled and buzzed, and my terror grew as his featureless face and body seemed to reach out to me. All of a sudden, I was shaking uncontrollably in panic, fear, and the same electricity he seemed to give off. Around that time, I woke up. I believe these to be unrelated, but I'm unsure. Within the same line of my theory, I experienced the most chilling thing of all. I believe everything that night was real. I live in a place where the indigenous people were pushed out like so many others, and our property is actually built over what we assume to be an ancient fishing camp, as we have found lures, old stone-carved bowls, and fishhooks. It was about 11:35 p.m., and it had just rained. I was in the small house's bathroom, and I leaned my head out the window to smell the wonderful earthy scent. As I did so, I heard chanting in the native language to this place. I know this because in school, we were taught parts of the native language. I got chicken skin. The chanting used words that I couldn't understand, but were definitely in the native tongue. What was even more chilling was that it sounded as if it was inside my head, but not in the way you would imagine it and narrate it with a voice inside your head. I wasn't hearing my voice. I was hearing an elderly voice chanting foreign words. It was as though it was all around my head for about 5 to 10 seconds. I was frozen there listening. There are no words to describe it honestly, and there is nothing like it. It's one of those things you have to experience yourself. Make of this what you will. It was late September of 2018, and my girlfriend and I were riding around the Regalsville, Pennsylvania, and Milford, New Jersey area. Two small, quaint towns divided by the Delaware River. The time was between 9 to 10 p.m. when we pulled into the Regalsville boat launch, which is actually on the New Jersey side. I parked my car on the far side of the lot, backing up to the abandoned railroad trestle, and we got out. We start talking while still in the area of the car. I crack open my first, and only, beer of the night. Soon after we arrive and proceed to relax, I see movement coming from the area of the Delaware River, from a wooded area. I saw a being, very tall, dark, and what appeared to be long, hairy arms, walking across the other end of the dimly lit parking lot. When it crossed in front of the Porta-John portable toilet, it was taller than the toilet unit. At first I thought, that's weird. There must be homeless people living here. Then I wrote the long, hairy arms off as this homeless person wearing a large, puffy winter jacket, which again I thought was pretty odd, as it was a mild late September night when I was wearing shorts and a lightweight zip-up jacket, just in case. I go into the trunk of my car and pull out my tire iron. I drag it across the ground to make noise, in hopes of scaring off or avoiding confrontation with the homeless person and people here. However, I felt very small and powerless wielding the tire iron. Moments later, from about 50 feet to the right of us, down a steep embankment running into the river, we hear 2 to 3 loud, distinct, what I have now learned to be tree knocks. We both freeze, and my girlfriend suggests maybe it's time to leave as the feeling in the air is heavy. I say no, that we will not be scared away. We continue to chat briefly when all of a sudden, a large humanoid shadow appears over us, which would be standing directly behind us on the railroad trestle. This figure has large, broad shoulders, a large head. I freeze and say to my girlfriend, "Shh, stand still and don't peep." I'm watching the shadow of this thing in front of me when I see its shoulders kind of dip back in one fluid motion, while I see again the same long, loose hair as the first person I saw cross in front of the Porta-John. I got very nervous and said, "Get in the car. Get in the car." I hop in and peel off out of there. In the car, I'm stammering, "What was that? What was that? What was that?" I'm shaking and scared, trying to connect the dots to what it was I just saw. I do about a 2-mile loop and quickly come back and do a U-turn in the boat launch to shine my headlights onto whatever I saw, but nothing was there. I drive back into Pennsylvania over the bridge and pull into the Regalsville Inn. At this point, I'm shook to my core, not understanding what it was I just saw. So shook up, I'm nearly crying. At this point, I did not pin it as a Bigfoot. I just simply did not know. After we returned back to her house, I could not sleep. I'm searching the internet high and low about what it was I could have possibly saw, and that's when I stumbled upon Bigfoot tree knock videos. I froze. The knocks in those videos is exactly what we heard. I woke her up to confirm this. Only then is when I realized I might have seen a Bigfoot. That is when the facts started settling in. The large being that passed in front of the Porta-John was taller than the toilet unit. The puffy winter coat sure looked like long hairy arms, not arms in a puffy jacket. The tree knocks. The figure that appeared in the shadow over and behind us had the same scraggly hair and large broad shoulders. To this day, I'm not even sure of what I saw. The signs, however, all point to a Bigfoot. I was so disturbed by this encounter that the very next morning, I actually went back to the boat launch in an attempt to find anything that can help me piece together what happened. I searched the area where I first saw it appear to no avail. The location we heard the tree knocks from was inaccessible, as it was steeply downhill and directly into the river. To this day, I'm still stunned by this encounter and honestly haven't told many people. But I know what I saw, and forever ingrained in my mind will be the image of the large being crossing in front of, taller than the porta-john, with its long hair hanging off its arm while taking long strides into the woods or the other side. Also worth noting that Bigfoot or other cryptic or paranormal creatures were not even on my mind. That is my true story. Please let me know if you know of what we saw that day. Okay, so this just happened a few months ago. For some background on me, I grew up in a religious household, which means my family believe in the supernatural. Spirits, angels, God, the devil, we believe it. My parents have told me stories, and I have my own stories with dealing with the supernatural growing up. I could see things when I was young, and as I grew up, every now and then, I would see something in the house. I only have stories of sleep paralysis, astral projection, and lucid dreaming. This past Christmas, my then fiancé bought me a huge panda bear that was almost as tall as me. I loved it and slept with it in my bed. After we got married and I moved into his apartment, there wasn't much room for the panda, so we placed it in the storage closet. Now, what happened last Thursday is something that has not happened to me in over a decade. After moving in, I kept feeling weird sleeping in the bedroom, especially when by myself. I always got that strong sensation it's something or someone was watching me. I just brushed it off and figured the feeling was being in a new place. On this night, I was dreaming, which is normal. My husband woke up out of the blue and saw me shaking as if I was having a seizure. He was going to call 911 when I woke up, sat right up, and gasped. I see a white, hooded figure standing over him on the right side of the bed, peeking at us. My heart is bursting out of my chest. It's been a long time since I've seen an entity. He asked what was wrong. I said there's something looking at us. He turns to look in front of our bed where the TV stand is, and he said it's sitting on the table. Immediately, he grabbed me and began to pray in Jesus' name and rebuke whatever spirit it was. It went away. Neither one of us could sleep the rest of the night. We stayed up discussing what he saw and what I saw. While what I saw was a white hooded figure, his was a black hooded figure crouching on the table. The next morning he says, "Do you think the panda has something to do with it? Because I get an eerie feeling when I walk past that." I tell him I feel the same way whenever I look at it too. Even our dog barks at it and tries to attack it. We contemplated the whole day on whether or not we should throw it out. So the following day he goes to work and I'm alone with the dogs. I decided to clean the house using the anointing oil my parents gave me and prayed. Every time I walked past the closet with a panda and say Jesus, my whole body would get cold, and I would have shivers and goosebumps all over. I called my husband and told him what happened, and when he came home, he threw it out. It feels a little better in the apartment, but my parents are supposed to be coming this week to do more praying and cleansing. Hopefully, that will get rid of whatever spirits were left. Here's a quick update. My dad came over and prayed, and things were much better after that. So, for almost 2 weeks, things have been calm. Our upstairs neighbor is a strange woman who never leaves her house and hardly sleeps. I can hear her around 1 a.m. moving stuff and walking around every single night. I always get weird vibes from her. So anyway, When my husband first moved in, she gave us some groceries. Fast forward to a few days ago, and she gives us a chew toy and snacks for our dogs. Shortly afterwards, that feeling of being watched returned. And last night, I had just dozed off when I felt the bed shaking. I look, and my husband is shaking just like I was in the previous incident. I look over by our closed bedroom door, and this humanoid creature is crawling on the ceiling, trying to hide in the darkness of the corner. It was hard to make out, but I know it was a grayish dark color and had some type of small horns. I didn't know what to do at this point. I'm not as spiritually strong as my parents, so just praying wouldn't be good enough. I turned on a song called Jesus, Jesus, Jesus and put it on low on repeat, and was happy to fall back asleep. I've long thought it had something to do with whatever my neighbor is into. Usually, the same time she wakes in the early a.m. is when I get that eerie feeling of being watched. Something I also noticed between these two incidents. I always lucid dream, meaning I know that I'm dreaming and can manipulate my dreams, and even sometimes drag them out longer when I want. I've been doing this since I was around 8 years old. I also always remember them when I wake up. During these two occurrences, I didn't lucid dream and believed what was going on was actual reality. Plus, after waking up, I couldn't remember what happened in them. It felt as if whatever that spirit is was implanting those dreams in my head. I'm going to throw out the dog toys and have both my parents come back and pray and do a cleansing with the oil. My parents live in a wooded part of Northern California, an old mining town. We have about 3 abandoned mine shafts. Frankly, they had been used to dump old things or dead rattlesnakes to prevent the dogs from eating them. I know, gross, but whatever. My parents have a 5th-wheel trailer they parked in the front part of the yard, and I stay in it when I visit. I'm Native American, so I know there's weird shit out there, but this night, I slept with the windows open anyway because it was pretty warm. There's a mine shafted maybe 100 yards away on the property, across the road that one of the windows was facing. I started to hear a moan and howling noise coming from that direction. I grew up out there, so I blew it off as a coyote or bobcat. But it slowly sounded more human, like someone who was hurt and moaning in pain. I remember clutching my medicine pouch around my neck and just feeling completely unsafe. I peeked out the window, and there was an orange-yellow glow coming from inside the shaft. It faces upwards at a 45-degree angle. Instantly, my instincts were screaming, "Nope, nope, nope, time to go." My mom's dog was on the bed, shaking, but completely silent. She's a small dog, so she usually barks at her own farts. I scooped her up, crouched around the bed until I got to the door. I swung it open and booked it to the house. Thank God the front door was unlocked. I made a bit of commotion when I came in, so my dad came running out of the bedroom with his gun. I told him what I saw and how Sophie, my dog, was terrified. At this point, she piddled herself because you could still slightly hear the moaning. My dad peeked out the window and literally said, "That's something we should leave alone. I don't like it." Now, my dad is one of those people who's very serious and doesn't believe in supernatural stuff, but my dad was genuinely scared. I slept on the floor in his room that night like I was a kid, and heard that noise all night. At one point, there was tapping at the back sliding glass door, but none of the dogs made a peep. They looked in that direction with their hair standing up, but made no noise. Absolutely unlike them. Needless to say, I sleep in the house when I visit now. Our nanny told me that the house next to us was haunted because we could hear knocking on the walls in our kitchen that is affixed to the next house. We live in a neighborhood that has houses sticking next to each other. There are a lot of times when the cabinets in our kitchen would open randomly, and one time all of them opened, and I was alone in our house. There is always the sound of a faucet turning on and water flowing, even though ours was off. Once, I bought some Chinese incense to cleanse the house, and when I got to the kitchen, the knocking became loud and continuous. I was really creeped out. Sometimes I would stay in late or wake up to get water or snack at like 3 or 4 a.m., and there would be knocking and water running. My parents and sisters get easily scared and would deny what I told them and say it was the neighbors, but seriously, who would do that early in the morning? One time at dawn, the spirits are disturbing me, and I was scared, so I ran back to our living room, and when I closed the door, I heard a sound of psst, which is usually a sound we use to call someone. I ran back to my room like a madman. I also went to a Catholic school in another city in college at a school dormitory for girls, and our school was known to be really haunted, and was next to a hospital which is also owned by the school. Our dormitory above the school is also haunted because it is on the same floor as the cadaver rooms. It is a medical school. Even during the day, the spirits on the 3rd floor are famous for being haunted by a girl that they say died at the hospital or something. When we were in class, there would be sounds of moving chairs and banging on the blackboard. We thought it was the room upstairs that was moving chairs, and my classmate went to check, and there was no one there during our class in the room next to ours. One subject, we were about to start class, and we usually ignored the banging, but when our professor arrived and we had to pray before class, I kid you not, but the screen for the projector hanging on the wall moved along with a very loud bang, and all of us were shocked. Our teacher at the front got really scared, and when we finished praying, she dismissed us out of fear, so we got some free time that afternoon. In the hospital, there is a legend that when a patient will see the girl, I forget her name, that patient will die soon. Someone told me that, before the school was built, some spiritual expert told the builders or owners of the land that it is inhabited by a lot of spirits, aka it is a spiritual ground dimension something. Our school and hospital is located at the heart of the city, and it is a famous school. We have a saying that you are not an SPCN if you have never experienced a haunting at our school. San Pedro College is the name of our school in Davao City. I am also a victim of those hauntings very badly because, at that dorm, I was played with by some spirits. I was about to go to bed in the room at the end of the dorm, which is adjacent to the cadaver room. I used to have a different room, but I still had some spooky experience, but not like the most recent one. When I got back to my room that is next to the bathroom, the faucet had been running out of the blue, and so I turned it off. I wondered why would someone turn it on in the middle of the night without turning it off, when the bucket was overflowing. I was accompanied by my older dorm mate, and since I had a bad feeling, I started to play some religious music to ease my fright. And then, that was the time I was hearing whispers and a lady crying. I couldn't understand the whispers, and I got really scared and went to my dorm mate's room and asked her if I could sleep in her room that night. She told me my classmate who stayed at our dorm before had a similar experience. So, when I went to get some pillows and blankets, the whispers got louder, and suddenly the whisper got close to my right ear, and that was the time I had a panic attack and hurriedly went to her room. I didn't sleep that night, and in the morning I told my other dorm mates next to our rooms what I experienced, and all of us got scared and were rushing to prepare for class. After that, the psychosis started to happen. I was not diagnosed as bipolar and schizoaffective then, since it was my first attack episode. This was in 2014. Before that, I was already feeling stress from school. I was very lightheaded and started to see some figures during class, and I was slowly having a panic attack again, which led me to start having wisdom teeth aches. 4 of them, and I went to our school dentist. He said something about the spiritual meaning of the wisdom teeth, and my mind was already frantic, and I was calling my mom and told her to come to me. The city is 3 to 4 hours long by bus. And after that, everything went down. We had dinner and I was crying the whole time. We went to a priest to have a pray over and stayed at a hotel with my mom and sister. And traveling there, I had a panic attack again in the Jeep because I couldn't breathe. We went down and I literally fell and cried on the street with many people watching me, and we were next to the hotel and I started to become catatonic. I wouldn't move and sat on a chair outside while they were trying to get me inside, and when we were climbing the stairs, I had another panic attack because when a man went upstairs ahead of us, he said something and I thought if we went to our room, they would let the man sexually assault me. Yes, I was thinking of weird things now. More things happened, and I'm not going into more details since this is a long story already. Long story short, I was hospitalized for going crazy. I'm on medication and therapy now. I have depression along with other possible mental illnesses like PTSD, BPD, etc. All of those happened because of stress. So, stay healthy physically and mentally, folks. A little background. Growing up in my parents' house, we had the largest cemetery in town directly behind our home. To give a picture, there was my house with a 6-foot wooden fence and then a copse of pine trees, which was cemetery land. The land that the cemetery vaults were retained, and then the cemetery itself. The man who originally built the house had put in a gate in the back of the fence because his business was abutted to the cemetery property. But when he and his wife divorced, he sold the house, but there were 2 paths that led from that gate, one to his business and one to the cemetery itself. In this cemetery, there are over 3,000 graves, most of them the flat plaques, very uniform and neat, with a few headstones, a couple mausoleums, and a few private burial sites that require a key. Also, several of my family members are buried there. My great-grandparents, great-uncles, aunts, uncles, and cousins. This is about my great-grandma, who died of a broken heart, 6 months after my great-grandfather died. She would be at our house all the time after he passed. My father and mother diligently taking care of her. She was in her 80s, and I didn't realize what a treasure she was at the time since I was just in the 5th grade. She would often take naps in my room, meaning that I would have to give up my privacy and hang out with my family when my introverted self wanted to be alone. Then, one day, my mom was in the kitchen crying because great-grandma had been in the hospital, but I didn't know it was serious. She had died of a heart attack, but really it was a broken heart. She had never been that ill, but her health took a sudden turn for the worse when she lost her mate. The other thing about my great-grandmother, she was a stickler for cleaning up. She took pride in her house for being clean. After she passed, I guess we decided that she liked our house the best. My mom always had a cup of tea in the morning and afternoon. She'd put the mug she used in the morning near the stove so she could reuse it in the afternoon. We'd all of a sudden start finding it near the sink with water in it. Also, beds that were unmade would be made, especially mine, since great-grandma would nap in my bed. I never heard the tap of the sink go off, but I did often hear the clink of my mug hitting the counter. There was only ever one mug broken. This phenomena was still going on, not as much, until my parents' house was decimated by a tornado. The house is being rebuilt on the same property. We hope that great-grandmother's ghost hasn't been too disturbed. Hi, I'm not entirely sure how to go about writing this. I do want to preface with the fact that I spent over 2 years as a ghost tour guide and have tons of stories to tell from that, as well as everyday life if anyone would be interested. My mom's side of the family has been open to the paranormal since my great-grandmother, as far as I'm aware, when she and her husband found a burial ground on the property where they built their family home. My dad's side is not open at all, to the point where he loudly and proudly exclaims that he won't believe until something scratches, abducts, or otherwise pokes and prods him. And, as we were about 5 months from going on a trip to Edinburgh and going into the catacombs, he was proclaiming this at least once a day. I assume that is what drew the man, not really sure how else to classify the thing, as he appeared not long after the daily proclamations started. Now, it is important to know the layout of the rooms for this. The house had a straight hallway that ended in my door. When standing in my door, facing the hall, my then 7-year-old brother's room was directly on the left. My dad's room was about 4 to 5 feet further up the hall and to the right. It was about 2:30 to 3 a.m. when it appeared. I woke up for seemingly no reason and saw the time on my bedside clock. I don't remember the exact time, only that it was around 3 a.m. I sat up and, when sitting up, faced my open bedroom door. Standing there in the lit hallway was what I can only describe as an emaciated man. His limbs were too long, too thin, and overall just wrong. It's the only way I can think to describe it. I remember looking at him, frozen, and thinking that he looked like a jungle cat, crouched on those 2 long limbs. It had thin, oily black hair that only hung to about chin length. All of the things that had me terrified about this thing. The stretched skin, predator poise, and too big presence for a thing that thin. All of those things, nothing had my heart stopping, like the smile. It was all teeth. Too wide and just reinforced the wrongness of this thing. It never came into my room. It did go into my brother's room that first night. It came again to my door for the next 2 nights, right around the same time. It never went back into my brother's room, but it did start entering my dad's room. I remember crying myself to sleep every time it left, terrified that if I left my room, as if my open doorway was actually anything of a deterrent, it would come back, or it would be able to hurt me or get in. Again, not like there was actually anything there to keep it out, but terrified teen logic is only slightly better than terrified toddler logic. Instead of hiding under a blanket, I was hiding behind an open door. I remember having my grandmother bring me a bundle of sage and trying to cleanse the house that way for the 2nd night. When it showed up again, that night for the 3rd time, I salted around and in the house. I don't know for sure what it was. I don't know if it was corporeal or some sort of spirit. I just know I am still terrified of it. I have been looking into the crawler, but I'm not sure if it fits. Has someone else had any experience with something like this? How did you get rid of it? I would really like to know in case it decides to come back. I'm also open to questions about the situation, though I think I managed to put everything here. I'm labeling this as an encounter for now, as I'm not sure if it really counts as any sort of debunking or advice. More of just cautious curiosity. My passion for the paranormal started over 20 years ago. I was just a teenager, and my stepdad had died of cancer. I lived in a different state and didn't get a chance to say goodbye. I went over to my sister's house to watch my nephew. It was his nap time, so I placed him in his crib and walked down the hall to the living room. From the couch, I could see him in his room. I was really tired and decided I would take a nap while he was taking one too. I was in that half-awake state and kept hearing him jumping up and down in his crib and laughing. I was so tired but sat up and said, "Please go to sleep for Auntie." As I laid my head back down, I was almost asleep and heard a grown man whistling really loud. It was a quick tune, but it was loud. My nephew was staring at something and laughing. I completely panicked and froze in fear, as I thought someone had broken in. I ran down the hall to protect my nephew, and there was no one else in the room. I ran outside until a friend could come over. When I made it back in the house and made sure no one was there, I started to explain the details to my friend. I took my nephew back to his room to change his diaper. As I was changing him, he pointed towards his closet door and said, "Papa." He called my stepdad Papa. This experience brought me so much comfort knowing that our loved ones are still with us, even after they pass. For the many years after the experience, I looked for more. I wanted more validation for more experiences and from the experiences of others. In my early 20s, my husband and I met a couple through his work that seemed as interested in the paranormal as I was. One of the haunted places in my town was the obvious, a cemetery. The cemetery was right next to an asylum and many other state buildings that had well-lit parking lots. My friend and her husband picked me up one night after work to go to the cemetery for the first ghost hunt, as there were many stories about the specific location. It was late, and as we started through the cemetery path, it felt as if there were spider webs brushing across my face. Not much happened for a while until we walked to the back towards the mausoleum. There were trees and ivy with a small dirt hill that had a little path with nothing more at the end but a chain-link fence. On the other side of the fence was one of the state buildings with light coming from the parking lot. My friend and I noticed what we thought was a security guard walking along the chain-link fence on the cemetery side. With the light from the parking lot and the darkness from the cemetery, I couldn't make out features other than his bulky uniform and hat. He wasn't facing me and was pointing a flashlight towards the ground, swaying it back and forth as if he were looking for something. I was at the top of the ivy path, looking down towards him, waiting to be busted for being in a cemetery past dusk. He made an abrupt stop, did a military about-face maneuver, and raised his flashlight at us in a mechanical motion. I still saw no features. I knew by the movement it wasn't a security guard. I never thought when I saw my first ghost it would look so solid and real. I honestly don't know what else it could have been. Although a little jarring, it is what I was looking for. I will always have a passion for the paranormal, as I know from experience there is so much more out there. Many years ago, maybe 3 years after my father died, still in my childhood home. My father was a very large man, 6 feet plus and over 300 pounds. Every night, without fail, when I was a child, he would come check on me whenever he was on his way to bed. He loved his horror movies, but my mom hated them, so he would watch them after she went to bed. They slept on the floor above me. One night, me and my dog, Buddy, were still awake at around 12-ish, the usual time he would come check in on us. I heard his footsteps coming up the hallway. We lived in a really old house, and him being such a huge dude, had a very specific sound when he walked through the hallway. I heard it, same steps, same weight, same pace, all the way up the hall, right up to my bedroom door. I had never been so hopeful and terrified at the same time. All I wanted was for him to walk back in my door. I would have chalked it up to the stress of losing him, or maybe just the floorboard settling, but it stopped right when it got to my door. And then, right as Buddy was fixated on the door handle, the same moment I would have seen it turn. Buddy got up, off the bed, walked to the door, sniffed the door crack, and his tail started wagging. Cue me sobbing. Never believed in it before. Don't know if I believe it now, but I can hope. I was never ready to lose him, and I don't think I ever would have been. But hearing those steps sometimes when I stay in that old room brings me more comfort than anything else possibly could. Around the age of 3, I would have nightmares every night. Upon waking up, I would sit up on my bed, and in the doorway was a family of 3 standing there looking at me. A mom, dad, and a little boy. They all wore old-looking clothing, and the mother was in a dress that had a poofy bottom. Anyways, I would get really scared and cover my eyes, but then I would peek through my fingers. They would be coming closer towards me, and eventually they would be right next to my bed. They would tell me everything was okay, and then I just had a bad dream. The mom would caress my hair, and they would stay with me until I would fall asleep. This happened almost every night until we left that house. A little after I turned 4, I was watching Toy Story and decided I wanted to blast off just like Buzz and Woody did at the very end of the movie. I was wearing overalls that day, and the family in my room told me if I lit my bed on fire, I would be safe. So I snuck around my house, found a small pack of matches, and lit my bed on fire while I was sitting on it. Naturally, everything caught on fire quickly, and my mom rushed in and pulled me off the bed. She described it as a ring of fire surrounding me, but none of the fire was touching me. We all survived, and only my bedroom had to be prepared. In the ambulance, my mom asked why I lit my room on fire, and I told her the people said I could and I would be okay. Meanwhile, my parents also saw the family in that house as well. My mom recalls seeing a little boy run through the wall, and she heard someone whisper her name. We had phone calls from no one. This was before caller ID. Lights turning on and off, and small objects moving around. Some of these things happened in front of friends as well. On one occasion, my great aunt, who is a medium of sorts, came over to the house with family. My parents didn't tell me this story until I was older, but she went up to my dad and said, "There is a family that loved on this land, and they're still here. They want you to leave." She described the family exactly how I described them to my parents. Fast forward to the summer I turned 6. My parents wanted to till the backyard and lay down grass. We had a couple family friends come to help us, and while they were tilling, they hit something deep in the dirt. When they pulled it up, it was a huge bone that matched what a femur would look like. My dad and our friend pushed it way back down into the dirt and stopped tilling. We didn't move from that place until I was 7, and I am now 28, and my family and I will never forget all that happened there. I was born in '94, and that house still exists in San Jose, California. It was actually a garage that was converted into a cottage, and it sits behind another house. I now have a 5-year-old daughter and have done my best to protect her from anything paranormal like that. In hindsight, my parents feel they should have called the police about the femur, but everyone was in such shock that day, we just put it back and rarely spoke of it. The church campus consists of the sanctuary, The office, an empty, decrepit house where the priests used to live that was later used as a meeting space until it was condemned, and a cemetery with the oldest graves being those of war of 1812 soldiers. All of the buildings have stone exteriors. A priest died in the house in the late 1800s. He was old, so nothing nefarious there. But he still haunts the place, which seems odd to me since he was a priest, and obviously believed in heaven, etc. Why stick around? When I first started working there, I was in the office with a member of the congregation who told me that on several occasions when they left the old house and turned off all the lights, they would turn around and see lights that had switched back on inside through the windows. I believe in the paranormal and have had an experience myself, so I was intrigued. When I left the office that day by myself, I turned off the lights. At the last light switch, I felt almost an electric buzz through my finger. The office itself is old, so it wouldn't have surprised me if something wasn't grounded right, etc. Didn't think anything unusual about it. I went back to my desk to grab my things and lock the door and the light switch I had turned off, which was on. Keep in mind, this was the same day as when I found out about the priest. I've tried asking him again to show me any sign that he's there, but he's never done anything else in the 4 years I've been working there. But without asking. I've seen flashes of light in a dark windowless room. I'm not sure if it was pareidolia, but I saw a man cross in front of my headlights and disappear. He had dark hair and was wearing a white shirt. I once unlocked the deadbolt on the door to the church, and when I went to turn the knob to go inside, something turned it the opposite way in my hand. This was during lockdown, so definitely no one was inside. I ran. I've seen motion detector lights outside turn on by themselves, and when I've jumped in front of them waving my hands, they've never come on. I heard this one from my boss, who's a priest. The organist was practicing by themselves in the church when a pencil went flying across the room. My boss also told me that members have said they've seen the priest looking out of the windows of the house. The decrepit house is supposed to be torn down within the next year or two. I'm not sure how or if that will affect the priest who won't leave. Maybe he finally will. The first 8 years of my life, my siblings and I were raised by my grandparents in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, where the marathon begins. They lived in a very old, historical house built in the early 1800s. It was said that Lincoln's former maids were the first to occupy, and records show that in the early 1900s, a woman had died during a fire in the attic. I absolutely loved growing up in that house, but my Nana hung all of the old photos of the maids throughout the house, and they looked quite spooky. One night when I was 5, I was sharing the king-size guest bed with one of my brothers when I saw a white figure wearing a long dress and a bonnet appear in the entranceway across and to the right of the bed. I said, "Papa?" thinking it was my first grandfather, whom had died before I was born. The figure moved slowly over to the bed and folded the blankets and sheets as one might do when stripping a bed, exposing my torso to the cold draft. I instantly froze and looked over at my brother, who was still asleep. I watched the ghost exit through the door and closed my eyes, absolutely batshit scared. I had a really intense flashback of visiting Florida when I was 2, but cognitive memory does not really allow memories to stick from this age. In the morning, I told my Nana, and she laughed, stating I was being silly. I was so upset because I knew what I had experienced was real. Years later, at Thanksgiving, I overheard my grandmother telling one of my cousin's boyfriends that the house was indeed haunted. and the photo of the maid who died always fell off the wall when she would hang it up in any other room than the kitchen. She also saw laundry being folded mid-air in that same guest room twice. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true, scary ghost stories. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. If you are awake, I hope you've enjoyed this collection. In the meantime, please take care of yourselves, and I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good night.